because it's really hard to eat healthily if you have cravings. It's really hard to eat the amount you need if your appetite regulation system has been disrupted and is telling you eat more, eat more. It's really hard to lose weight, even if you're eating less calories, if you're giving your body the internal message to store fat.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum podcast with Coach Strick. Join us as we expand the weight loss conversation to beyond just calories and dare to ask the question, why does eating less and exercising more sometimes not produce the desired results? Here's Coach Strick to discuss this Calorie Conundrum.
Hello and welcome to the Calorie Conundrum podcast. This is Coach Strick, and on today's episode, we have Dawn Cuckow. Dawn struggled with her own issues of disordered eating, but it was her debilitating PMS pain that sent her searching for answers. After finding out that when she changed her nutrition, she was able to completely eliminate her PMS pain, Dawn changed careers. Dawn is now a nutritional therapist, weight loss coach, and best-selling author of the book, The Body Effect. Her method gets to the root causes of why your body is blocking your weight loss, so it becomes easy to lose weight. It's about finding a way of eating that works for you so you can create a unique path to healthy eating, feeling great, and lasting weight loss. Let's hear what Dawn has to say about how you can make weight loss easy. Dawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is such a great conversation about, it's not just about the calories.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today. I wanted to ask you, what brings you to this field of nutrition and health?
Okay, so for me, it was a bit of a roundabout journey. I had my own struggles with food when I was younger. For many years, I craved food, I binge ate, I had a really, really bad relationship with food, and I ended up bulimic for a couple of years. And eventually I worked with a clinical psychologist and my relationship with food started to normalize. And it wasn't until some time later that I ended up studying nutrition. I used to have really, really bad period pains, like terrible pains every month. And the doctors didn't know what to do. They'd given me prescription painkillers, but it was barely touching the edge of it. And the next step was an exploratory operation. And I really didn't want to go down that route. And I went to see a nutritional therapist. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting great things because I tried a lot of things. And she explained to me how the inflammatory mediators in my body were triggering those extreme pains. And she showed me how to use diet to actually address that. And within 3 months, I never had period pains again. So it was that triggered me to go and study nutritional therapy. And whilst I was studying, I had my first weight loss client. And she was this really lovely lady, and we worked together on a plan for her. And she went away and she came back 4 weeks later, and she'd gained 1/2 stone because she hadn't been able to follow the plan. And I just felt like I completely failed this client and I couldn't let go of it. My tutors didn't know what I could have done differently. And it was that ultimately led to a decade of research into why we have cravings, why it's so hard to lose weight. And that led to working with weight loss clients and writing my book. And well, that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
Okay, great. Yeah. So thanks for sharing your story. And I would like to say something about that as well. And it's the fact about the menstrual pains, the PMS, menstrual pains. I've had experiences before where I mention what you eat can affect that, or what you do in your life, how you live your life can affect these pains. And it's almost like I said some evil thing to people and they get all defensive and want to argue with you about it. And so have you worked with other women that have benefited from changing their nutrition and reduce the pains that they've had during the menstrual cycle and things like that? Can you talk more about that? Because I know a lot of people think this is it's impossible. They have no control over all this pain, and it's just it is what it is, and it happens to everyone type of deal. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does make a huge difference. So I myself went from extreme pain to no pain at all. But I think maybe it helps if people say, well, how does that make a difference? It sometimes helps to understand why. So, for example, I was given painkillers, mefenamic acid, And what it does, it blocks, or it's supposed to block the effect of those inflammatory mediators. But when you use diet, what it does is it stops those inflammatory mediators being formed in the first place. So it's to do with the type of fats you eat and the conditions in your body. So the type of fats you eat can either cause inflammation or they can reduce inflammation. And some fats, like the omega-6 fats, can go either way. And it depends on the conditions in your body. So for me, it was about eating more of the omega-3 fats and change, which are always anti-inflammatory, and changing the conditions in my body. So for example, balancing my blood sugar levels and cutting out sugar. And sugar is very inflammatory. So all of that actually stops you from producing so many inflammatory mediators. So personally, I think it's better to target the root cause rather than to take, where you can, rather than to take medicine to block the effect of it.
Yeah, that's one of my mantras for life, I guess, in working in this health and fitness arena, is the fact that you have more control over your body and how you feel than we're being led to believe. A lot of people think that they hand over their health to somebody else, and they believe that the pill that reduces their symptoms is curing them of the problem, when in reality the symptom is coming from some other root cause that's further downstream that they're not addressing because they're not changing the underlying issues. That's like my mantra, is to educate people about that and how they can actually change these things themselves, and they don't have to wait for something to go completely wrong in their body before they make some change,
I think people understand that some foods are good for us and some foods are bad for us, but I don't think what's so well known is how food can be used therapeutically to actually target the root causes of things, and exercise and lifestyle as well.
Exactly. Let food be thy medicine, they say. Right? So Dawn, you wrote a book. It's called The Body Effect. And could you tell us more about that book and why you wrote it and what it's about?
Okay, again, this is quite a long story. The body effect, it's divided into two parts. So the subtitle of the book is Discover What's Triggering Your Cravings and Belly Fat, Reveal Your Unique Path to Lasting Weight Loss. So the first part of the book is a series of short chapters, and each chapter explains one imbalance in your body that can block your weight loss. Now, it might block your weight loss by triggering cravings. It might block your weight loss by giving your body the message to store fat, or by increasing your appetite, or even by making you extract more calories from the food you're eating. So there's a number of different ways these imbalances can block your weight loss. And then each chapter has a short questionnaire at the end, so you can tell if that imbalance is relevant to you. So by the end of part one, you know what's blocking your weight loss. And then part two is a step-by-step process. And at each step, you tailor that dietary step to the imbalances in your body and to your preferences and requirements, so to the food you like. So at the end of this process, you've got a sustainable way of eating that targets what's blocking your weight loss. Because it's really hard to eat healthily if you have cravings. It's really hard to eat the amount you need if your appetite regulation system has been disrupted and is telling you eat more, eat more. It's really hard to lose weight, even if you're eating less calories, if you're giving your body the internal message to store fat.
Exactly. And that's part of the calorie conundrum equation. And that what you just said is, even if it was all about calories in, calories out, if you can't control yourself around food, then that doesn't matter. If your hormones are so far off that you're starving all the time, or like you said, then the calories in, calories out is like an afterthought issue. Like, the issue is the cravings, is the hormones that are out of balance and things like that. And so it's nice to have, for people to be able to identify what could be causing some of these issues, because a lot of times people are in the dark about a lot of this stuff. And there's a few things in the book that I see as, basic information that everyone should know, but a lot of people don't know about. And one of those things is the obesogens. I've mentioned them on the podcast before, but could you talk about obesogens and some of the other things people might not be as much aware of as far as what's affecting their hormones and their blood sugar and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, obesogens are chemicals in our environment that can make us gain weight. And they do this in a number of different ways, but it's basically through disrupting our bodies. Now, you only need low levels of these chemicals to make you gain weight. And, everyone who lives in the modern world is going to be exposed to them because they're also a really common source is plastics, pesticides, tinned food. And the hormones, the obesogens leach from the chemicals, especially when those if we have plastic wrapped food, then especially oily or fatty food, the chemicals can leach from the plastic into the food. Then you ingest those chemicals. And those chemicals can affect your food preferences. They can disrupt the way your body regulates and stores fat. So all of this makes you gain weight without consuming more calories.
Yeah, so it's partly making you crave food more, and it's altering your metabolism in some cases, causing your metabolism to slow down. So even if you were eat the same amount, you would gain weight from that amount that you weren't gaining weight from before, because the obesogens and chemicals that have manipulated your metabolism, and that's not a good thing.
So, I mean, a really common one is BPA. And we all know that BPA disrupts our hormones, and we all know that plastics are bad for the environment. But I don't think it's so well known that those same chemicals can actually make us gain weight. And hormone disruption is a big reason for weight gain.
What else? What are some of the, in your book, what would you say the main, handful of things people need to be aware of when it comes to, what's blocking their weight loss besides obesogens? You mentioned hormone imbalance. What else is going on there?
Well, it's going to be different for everybody, but I think one of the really key ones at the moment is stress. Because our bodies are so brilliantly set up to cope with stress in a survival situation. We still have the fight or flight response to stress. But if you think about the last time you were stressed, chances are you didn't hit someone or run away. Or if you did, it probably didn't end too well for you. But, that's the system that's the response our body is set up to respond to stress with. Whereas in the modern world, we tend to sit around, we're frustrated at work, we are sat in a traffic jam getting more and more stressed, whatever it is, chances are we don't have that physical response. But our stress hormones they're designed for that physical response. So when the stress is over, the hormone cortisol stays high for a while, and that tells your body to refuel using calorific foods. So not only does it make you want to eat more, especially those high sugar, high fat foods, it makes you store that fat around your belly, because your belly is close to your liver. And if there's another emergency, because your body's still on stress alert, it can quickly convert that fat back to energy to fuel another fight or flight response. So when you're stressed, it's quite hard to lose weight.
And one thing that I try to point out, I've tried to point out in the podcast, and I try to get across to people that I work with, is that stress is not just a mental emotional thing. So, you got deadlines at work, you got obligations to your family and your kids and your husband or whatever. That's mental emotional stress, but all the other stresses affect your stress level as well. Physical stress, physiological stress, spiritual stress, and the mental emotional stress. And so when you have, an altered hormonal, regulation in your body that's off, that's a stress. And so that stress adds to the mental emotional stress of your work deadlines and, the traffic and all this kind of things. And then your physical stress, your body, if you go eating the wrong food for long enough, that can cause physical damage to your, stomach or lining of your intestines. And then you have physical stress that adds to the other stresses. And so you have all these stresses that you're stacking on each other. And like I say, the chain's going to break at the weakest link. And so for every person, their genetic, makeup determines what their weak link in their genetics is. And that's where you're going to have a problem. That's where you get diabetes. That's where you end up getting some kind of other kind of disease that is a cause of all the stress being stacked up on each other. And so,
Yeah,
what
and
are
everything.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead. Go
that's
ahead.
just going everything like you mentioned, how it then does the stress disrupts your gut lining. So this is an example of how the stress itself causes you to gain weight. But then if you end up with a weakened gut lining and it becomes a bit more permeable than it should be, that's when you get food intolerances. And when you have food intolerances, it increases inflammation, and inflammation makes you gain weight. And we often crave the foods we're intolerant to. So it becomes, once one part of your body becomes out of balance, it has a knock-on effect on other parts of your body. So you can have multiple things going on that all cause you to gain weight. But the good news about this, though, is that when you start to address one area, it then has a knock-on effect on other areas.
Exactly. So what are some of the recommendations? So we know we have these stresses that we've been accumulating, whether it be physiological, physical, mental, emotional, or just life in general. We've got all this stress. What are some of the things that we can help diminish that stress and start reducing the stress and healing the body so it can do what it's supposed to do?
Well, I think different things work for different people. But breathing exercises, there's a lot of breathing exercises out there, but I think a really simple one that anyone can do anywhere is to breathe in for the count of 4, in through your nose for the count of 4, hold for the count of 7, and then breathe out for the count of 8 through your mouth. And just do that a few times, and it can really help calm your body. Or even stroking a pet can be really helpful. Or I think it's really important to respond to what's actually going on for you. So if you're angry, do something physical. Go for a brisk walk, bash some cushions, lift some weights, put on some loud music and dance. If you're anxious, then maybe make yourself a herbal tea and sit down and write a list of what's stressing you, or draw your stresses, or paint it, or do something to get that anxiety out of your body. So again, it's about responding to what works for you. I mean, meditation can be really helpful for some people, but for other people, they find they can't really get into it and it's just more stressful. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution in any of this for people. But another thing that can really help with your stress is balancing your blood sugar levels. Because when your blood sugar drops low, your body releases stress hormones to push it back up again. So again, your body doesn't distinguish between the stress of having a fight with your partner and low blood sugar. It's the same, or bumping into a saber-toothed tiger. It's the same stress hormones that's released in each case.
Yeah, so just like anything, it's going to be individual to the person, but there are lots of things, and it's ultimately up to you to find out kind of what works for you to reduce these levels of stress. So Dawn, there's a section of the nutrition professionals and experts that they just say ultimately it's just calories in, calories out, and they may or may be right about what they're saying, but in reality that's not how it works in the human body. And so could you talk about how like a certain number of calories of one type of food versus a certain number of calories of a different type of food will have different reactions in the body and cause weight gain or potentially weight loss?
Yeah, so let's say you have a 250 calorie chocolate bar, or you could eat 250 calories worth of hummus with carrot sticks, for example. Now, they both contain the same number of calories, but they're going to have very different effects on your body. So you eat the chocolate bar, that's high in sugar, and sugar can reduce your sensitivity to a fat hormone, a hormone called leptin, a fat burning hormone. So if you're less sensitive to leptin, you're going to burn less fat. The sugar can also cause your blood sugar levels to rise high, so you release more insulin, and insulin tells your body to store fat, high levels of it. Because you've released high levels of insulin, your blood sugar then crashes, and when it goes too low, you can have cravings and for sugary foods and carbs, and you also release those stress hormones. So there's many ways that chocolate bar is disrupting your body that are going to make it harder for you to lose weight. Whereas if you take the hummus with carrot sticks, it's high in fiber and protein, so it makes you feel fuller for longer. It's high in nutrients. And when you eat a nutrient-rich diet, you feel less hungry and the hunger itself feels less unpleasant. It also contains phytoestrogens, which help balance your female hormones. So if female hormones are contributing to your weight gain, then it's going to be a really helpful food to include to help balance your body. So you can see that there's the same number of calories, but very, very different effects on your body.
Yeah, so it's not just the calories. It's not what you will burn and what you won't burn as far as energy. It's the effect, and that's kind of the name of your book, The Body Effect. Could you tell us more about that? I mean, that's kind of what it's about, right?
Yeah, because that's kind of what it's about, the body effect. When your body's in balance, it has a different effect on your body. Basically, everything becomes easier. Not only do you kind of improve your health, you get rid of those hormonal symptoms and everything, but it's easy to eat the amount you need. It's easy to choose the right foods. But when your body is out of balance, then it's hard to eat the right choice of foods. The unhealthy foods are much more appealing. It's hard to just eat the amount you need. And even if you are eating the amount you need, or even if you are eating a normal amount, I should say, or a regular amount, then you're probably still going to struggle to lose weight. So, yeah, it's really about the balance. So when your body's in balance, the effect of your body is that it's easy to eat healthy and lose weight.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of people that are starting out on a health journey or weight loss journey, starting, and once they get into it, it's really hard for them. And it's just because they haven't done it and their body's not used to it and their body's used to something else. And like you said, when it's out of, it's like it's not functioning correctly. And so therefore, hormones and other things are thrown off, which make it more difficult to function like it's supposed to. And so you have to do things to help get your body back in line. And when you do that, the effect is basically, it's easy. It's not hard to lose weight and get healthy if you're doing things to help your body do that.
But it can be really hard. I mean, my approach is about bringing your body into balance, to get rid of that cravings, to get rid of that desire to overeat, to stop giving your body the message to store fat. Yeah. But it takes a little bit of time. Your body took a while to become out of balance. It's not going to come into balance overnight. So in the meantime, it can be really hard to eat healthily if you have cravings. And believe me, I've been there. And if you have cravings, it's next to impossible to resist them. You can rely on willpower for a while, but with willpower, you're always fighting against your body. So if you give into cravings, if anyone's listening to this and they give into cravings, don't feel bad. It's not your fault. It's part of you're fighting against your body's survival instincts. So what can be really helpful is to have things in place when the cravings hit that help you either not reach for unhealthy foods or to eat less of them, or to find an alternative that still satisfies what you feel you need in that moment. So, for example, we tend to crave sweet and sugary foods, but having some protein, a high protein food, can help reduce those cravings in that moment. And we talked about breathing earlier on. Even stopping and creating a pause between that craving hitting and reaching for food can also help you slow down and actually not automatically reach for lots of food and eat it very quickly, which is what a lot of people do.
Yeah. So it's definitely, there's different things that you can do to modulate these symptoms or these cravings that you're having, to reduce them and ultimately eventually eliminate them potentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for women in particular, it can be very difficult for people to resist the chocolate, for example, when they're premenstrual. And one of my clients, what she found, she knew she couldn't not have chocolate at that time of the month. So what she did is she got the darkest chocolate she could find, which had less sugar in, and melted it on some nuts. Now, the nuts provided some protein, and she still got the chocolate. And she found that she was able to have that in small amounts rather than having to eat a lot of chocolate.
Yeah. So you're satiating the craving, but you're not overindulging in things that are going to make your cravings worse. going to push your
Yeah.
body out of balance more. Yeah.
Yeah, because when your body's out of balance, you don't want to keep it in that cycle of being more and more out of balance.
Yeah. Could you talk more about, and you talked in your book a little bit about food intolerances. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, food intolerances are becoming increasingly common.
Yeah.
And some of the most common foods to have an intolerance to are wheat and dairy. And it's because they're in so many foods.
Yeah.
And when we have an intolerance to a food, it generally happens because our stomach lining has become more permeable than it should be. So the food can get through that lining, the undigested food particles, and they cause an immune reaction, which causes inflammation. And inflammation can lead to weight gain. I mean, inflammation is not a bad response. If you have an injury, then it creates heat and pain and swelling, and that's actually your body healing itself. But if you have chronic low levels of inflammation, you might not even be aware of it. And it's that type of inflammation that's been going on for a long time that makes you store more fat. The other thing with food cravings is that these undigested food particles, or these incompletely digested food particles, can have an opioid effect on our brains. So we often crave the food because we feel better after eating it. So it can be very hard to avoid reaching for foods you're intolerant to.
Yeah, it's always surprising when I tell people about that. But some of these foods that we love so much, like you said, have some drug-like effect, and it's hard to stop eating it if you're kind of addicted to it, like you are a drug.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It really is hard. And often these foods are hidden. Things like gluten, for example, or wheat is in so many products. I think in the States you use more corn, don't you? But in the UK where I am, we have wheat in so many things, even things you wouldn't expect.
yeah.
So if you're trying to avoid a food because you think you're intolerant to it, then you have to look at the ingredients, because ingredients of foods are not always what you'd think.
Yeah, there's so many ingredients in products, and any number of those ingredients could be throwing our bodies out of balance.
I think the other thing is that food marketers, they want you to buy their food, and they often make foods look healthier than they are.
Yeah.
So, for example, if a yogurt says no added sugar, that always sets alarm bells ringing, because they probably, not always, but probably contain artificial sweeteners. And your body's absolutely not. I mean, another example of why it's not just about the calories. Artificial sweeteners contain virtually no calories. And yet, if you eat them, they've been linked to weight gain, even without consuming more calories overall, because our bodies aren't designed to handle that sweet taste without the calories. So it confuses our bodies.
Yeah, so that's another example of how it doesn't all add up. And they'll argue tooth and nail that it does add up, but like I said, there's more to it than just the numbers adding up. It's how hungry you are, how your body responds to it, and how your hormones are affected by it, how your blood sugar is affected by it. And all those things matter when it comes to if you're able to continue the diet or not. you know.
Yeah, and even if you stick to the set number of calories that you're allowing for yourself, you might still find you don't gain weight. So don't lose weight, because of the conditions in your body.
Exactly. And because what you're consuming affects your metabolism.
Yes.
What you're doing in your life as far as activities, exercise, and all that kind of stuff, it's all affecting your metabolism. So you have the same body and you have a certain number of calories, and whether you're losing weight or gaining weight is determined by how your body is functioning, how your metabolism is running, is going. And so if your metabolism is burning really hot, burning really fast, then you can consume a higher number of calories and stay the same weight. But if your metabolism is slowing down because of things you're doing, then even a lower amount of calories can make you gain weight. And
yeah, absolutely.
And that's a very important point that people need to at least be aware of, because so many people, they just want to eat less. That's like their answer to everything. And one of the things you mentioned before, which I'd like you to talk more about now, is when you eat less. I think you wrote something about this in your book. When you eat less, you're reducing the amount of nutrients you're getting, and that affects your metabolism. So could you talk a little bit about that? How, like, by reducing the total amount of food you're eating, you're getting less of the actual nutrients you need to get your metabolism to run like it should.
Yeah, I mean, if you're eating less calories, you really need to make sure everything you're eating is really nutrient rich. If you yo-yo diet, actually, that can even slow your metabolism. So then you need less calories to run your body.
Yeah.
So if you eat more calories than you need, you will gain weight. But that is only a part of the picture.
Yeah.
And if your metabolism's slowing down, so you burn less calories, then by constantly doing this yo-yo dieting, then you're going to need less calories overall. Then, of course, it becomes harder to lose weight.
Yeah.
And actually, the other thing is, I mean, I have a background of disordered eating, and counting calories doesn't help you get in touch with what your body actually needs. It keeps you caught on that whole obsessing about food. And that's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't help anybody. And then we end up feeling bad about ourselves. And so many people do this. They eat something they believe they shouldn't have eaten, or they've told themselves is bad. And then they feel really bad about themselves. And that actually doesn't help you get out of that cycle of binge eating or choosing those foods.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's like an endless cycle of it's just like a game that it's really hard to win if you're playing off the numbers alone, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you're completely starving and need nutrients, but you're out of calories, and your numbers say you don't get any more food, then you're going to have to really, use a lot of willpower to resist that. And then at other times when you're not hungry, but you have a certain number of calories you need to eat, and you eat it, then like you said, you're not in touch with what your body actually needs. And that's part of the issue, is being out of touch with your body. And
yeah, I mean, I think counting calories, it takes everything and puts it onto a number rather than what's on right for you. Yeah. And that number, as we already said, it doesn't tell you the effect that food's going to have on your body. So if you have all your calories from super nutrient dense foods, you're going to feel so much better as well. I mean, in theory, you could be on a low calorie diet and make your entire food calorie intake from cookies. Now, okay, it's pretty extreme and people probably wouldn't do that, but you're going to feel pretty rubbish, aren't you? Yeah. Whereas if you had all of that calorie intake from really nutrient dense foods, you're going to feel so much better. You're going to have the energy to be more active. So everything has this knock-on effect.
Yeah, and I would say eventually you'll feel like rubbish, because there's been experiments and stuff that people have eaten like junk food diets and stuff, and they've lost weight, and initially they lose weight and they feel great on these low calorie junk food diets, but over time you're going to the body's going to be depleted in certain vital nutrients if you're only eating junk food. And over time that's going to start having an effect on the body to where eventually you're not going to feel good anymore, no matter what your weight is. And so that's important to point out as well.
Yeah, we were talking before this podcast for a few minutes and just talking about the idea, if you had a magic wand and could wave it and become your ideal perfect weight, whatever that is for you, great, that might be great for a while. But actually, you would regain all that weight fairly quickly because you haven't changed the underlying conditions in the body, and you haven't changed, you haven't changed your attitude to food. You haven't changed what's going on for you. So unless you actually change the way you're eating and change those underlying conditions in your body, that weight will all come back quite quickly.
Yeah, you're not. If you don't change your environment, you don't change your thinking and mind around food, if you don't change your habits and activities and things you're doing with food, then all that stuff would come back as far as weight, because your body's just responding to the environment that you're putting it in, right?
Yeah.
So
This is why I think it's so important to focus on health, not weight. I think
yeah.
focusing on weight sets up a really negative mindset for so many people. And it's a mindset that you're going to lose ultimately for most people.
Yeah.
Whereas focusing on health, just making small changes that bring your body into balance, small healthy changes, then those small changes become sustainable. And then you can add in more changes. I mean, one of my clients said to me, well, it feels like I'm not doing anything now, because all those changes I've made, each change was a small change, but then they became habits and she built on them. So even though she's made enormous changes over a period of time, it feels like she's not doing anything because it's just her new, healthier way of eating.
Yeah, and that's ultimately kind of what you want to get to. And I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not a health freak, or I'm not crazy about all this. I mean, I really am passionate about it, but I'm not, I wouldn't call myself extreme. I mean, a lot of average people would say I'm extreme, but people look at what I tell them I do and don't eat, and they're like, "Oh, how do you do that? Like, I could never do that." And it's just like, it's easy for me to do because I've been doing it for 10 years now, you know. It's just the way I am, the way what I do, and how I am in the world. And so it's not hard for me to say no to certain foods, or to eat certain things, is because it's just what I do, you know. And if you can get to the level of it's just what you do, is to eat this type of food and do these type of things, then it's going to be so easy to maintain that and do that than forcing yourself to do something that you don't do, you know?
Yeah, and there's no point in feeling deprived because it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
But when your body's in balance, then those unhealthy foods, they're just not as appealing. You can take them or leave them.
Exactly.
Whereas when your body's not in balance, it's going to feel like a real effort. It's going to feel deprived to not have them.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, it's going to be hard to not consume sugar if in every meal and every time you eat, you're consuming lots of sugar. You've got to change the habit. You got to change the body's response to what you're eating, start giving it what it needs. And then eventually that craving for sugar is not going to be the same, like you said.
But we have and almost everyone has this, we have this kind of attitude to eating healthily and losing weight. So I've blown my diet, therefore I may as well go and eat 3 more pizzas and a few chocolate bars and a couple of packets of crisps. Whereas if you're just focusing on making small moves towards health, you lose that. And it's so much easier to do. I mean, they did this documentary in, I think it was the BBC, and they took 2 groups of people who were trying to lose weight, and they gave them each an identical cake. And they told one group the cake was healthy and low calorie, and the other group they didn't say anything to. And the group that had the healthy low calorie cake shared it out, had a slice each, and carried on with their healthy eating the rest of the day. The other group decided, even though it's exactly the same cake, the other group decided they'd blown their diet, so they may as well go out and get fish and chips that evening. So, it's this whole attitude is, I've blown it, I may as well give up.
Yeah. It's definitely our brains play games on us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So what you mentioned before about the we play this game of numbers with the calories in, calories out as far as food. The same goes for weight as well. So we play this scale game with a number, and we define our value by what the number says, and how good our day is by what the number says. And so we say, oh, the weight didn't go down, so today's a bad day, or I'm a bad person, instead of just using it as information to help guide us. We let that determine how we feel about ourselves and things like that, and we have to step outside of that and just use the information to help guide our decisions and guide our progress, rather than just let that determine how we feel.
I've been there. I know what it's like. I've kind of completely been there. But Actually, when you think about it, why should a number on a scale tell us how we should be feeling that day? It's kind of ludicrous when you actually look at it, isn't it? Yeah, that's no criticism implied of anyone that's doing it. I mean, believe me, I've done it. But it's so much better to get out of that.
Yeah, definitely. And awareness is the first step, I guess.
Yeah.
So being aware of these ideas, and then, that's the whole point of the podcast, is to kind of bring some of this information. And like I said, your book, The Body Effect, I think it should just, this information in it is just basic information that everyone should know, and yeah, and it would help so many people if they just had these concepts kind of in their head and they knew them. It would avoid so much struggle and strife and like self-deprivation and all that kind of stuff if people just had this basic information kind of floating around in their head. But we're not taught this stuff.
But also the way we feel about ourselves. I mean, one of my clients said to me that discovering her body was triggering her cravings, had taken away the shame of her overeating. And that's so huge, because so many people feel really bad about themselves when they overeat or eat bad foods.
Yeah, quote unquote bad foods, right?
Yeah, so quote unquote. Sorry, I don't mean to say some foods are bad like that. Foods they tell themselves are bad.
Yeah, exactly.
They tell themselves they shouldn't have eaten. I actually think this whole labeling of foods as good as bad is really, really unhelpful.
Yeah, it's yeah, yeah. I that's, if I were to whittle down my one secret with all this stuff, like, and how I function, if I were to like put it into one secret, the secret would be I do all the things I do because I want to, not because I have to. And if I wanted to go eat a large sized pizza right now, I could go do it. Like and I wouldn't feel bad about it, but I just choose not to. That's the thing. A lot of people, they put all these restrictions on themselves, and then if they do or do not do something, they say they're a bad person, or they can't do it or whatever. And I'm doing all the things I'm doing because I choose to, not because I have to,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
If you eat that large pizza and feeling bad about yourself doesn't change the fact that you've eaten that large pizza. It doesn't make it have any less of an effect on your body. So if you are going to eat something that you've told yourself you're not going to eat, it's far better to eat it slowly and really enjoy it. And that way you're also likely to eat less of it.
Yeah, that's one thing that you mentioned in the book, around eating these types of foods that we kind of label as bad. Could you talk more about that? How people can avoid binging on these type of foods? If they really like, if the food's calling to them, and they really want to have the cookie or the pizza or whatever. What can people do around that to make it less of a binge type episode? Okay,
so there's a lot of things that you can do, but let's say that cookie really is calling you. One time many people eat cookies and things is sitting down in front of the TV in the evening. Now, when we eat while we're distracted, we eat a lot more. So if you're eating cookies in front of the TV, actually take a break to eat your cookie, go into another room and sit down with your cookie and really focus on it so you notice what you're eating. Because if you're sitting in front of the TV, you probably eat a lot more without even being aware of it. There's other things you can do. We talked about pausing a bit before you reach for the food. If you do binge eat, it can be helpful to put all the food you're going to eat on a plate. Because if you binge eat, we've often got no idea of how much we're eating. And we tend to judge our food by our eyes rather than our stomachs. We know this from various studies. So putting all your food on your plate and trying to normalize the experience of eating. So many people, when they binge eat really fast. So if you eat really fast, try and slow it down. You can still have that food, but just really try and slow down the rate at which you're eating. Sit down and eat that food and focus on it. If your cravings are not that extreme, then maybe you could find a healthier food that still gives you what you feel you need in that moment. In fact, I run Master Your Cravings workshops that are free. And so if you go onto my Instagram, you'll be able to see if I've got one coming up, I'll put it there, or email me, dawn@dawncuckow.com. And I have a process I take people through that will really help them when the cravings hit.
Okay, so you got it all laid out, step by step process to kind of deal with the cravings and overcome
Yes,
them.
but it's also about, within these kind of guidelines, finding what works for you. And it's going to be different for everybody because everybody is different.
Yeah, so I think that's the key, is figuring out what works for them. How would you recommend someone do that on their own? Like if they didn't have someone to work with as far as a nutrition coach or something, how could someone begin the process of determining what's best for them when it comes to dealing with these cravings, getting on a weight loss journey type of thing?
Okay, so first of all, I would say get out of the diet mindset and focus on health, not weight. If you have my book, it will take you through a step-by-step process. Or if you don't have the book, you can get it on Amazon. But if you don't have the book, then I would pick one change. And I think a really good place to start with is breakfast, because what you eat for breakfast sets you up for the rest of the day. So I would have with your breakfast, I'd have some fruit or vegetables and some protein. And if you want to have carbs, choose some unrefined carbs, that's fine. And if you tend to have cravings in the evening, then increasing protein at breakfast can help. If you don't have breakfast because you're intermittent fasting, then make sure the first meal you have of the day meets those same guidelines. And that can be really helpful for the rest of the day.
Yeah. All right. So start with the breakfast, make sure it has protein, and then kind of just work from there. And that will help start to balance the body and reduce some of these other symptoms and cravings and things that are happening throughout the day.
Yeah.
All right.
And it also helps balance your blood sugar levels, which also helps with your stress levels. So it's a good place to start.
All right. So if somebody was, they're struggling to lose weight, they've tried to lose weight in the past maybe, and they were to come, I don't know, let's say you met them in an elevator, and you tell them that you're a nutrition therapist, and they mentioned that they have been struggling to lose weight. What piece of advice would you give that person just in a couple minutes on the ride down the elevator?
All right, one piece of advice. Okay, I would say, what are your stress levels like? Are you perimenopausal? And are you balancing your blood sugar levels? So for all of those things, a really good place is to start by balancing your blood sugar levels. So have, say, 3 small meals a day, plus a small snack mid-morning and a small snack mid-afternoon, and make sure you have some protein with each meal and snack. And the other thing I would say is increase your fruit and vegetables. When you have a meal, try to have half your plate with vegetables, because they have all sorts of benefits to weight loss that are far too long to go into. I'm in the elevator for 2 minutes with somebody.
Yeah.
But they also help you feel fuller, and they help balance your body.
Okay. All right. It's a good place to start with your process. You only got 2 minutes to talk to them. Any last words for the people out there trying to lose weight or interested in improving their health?
I would say don't feel bad about yourself if you're struggling with it, because there's a reason why you're struggling with it, and it's not your fault. And if you're struggling to lose weight, you will have biochemical imbalances in your body. But when you bring your body back into balance, it won't be a struggle to lose weight anymore.
Great. Yeah, that's good news to know and to learn, and that gives people hope, to encouragement to start working on improving the balances in the body, which isn't always easy. It's not always easy to figure it out and balance everything out. But like you said, once you do that, then everything else becomes easier.
Yes, absolutely.
But when you start, it's kind of like when you start exercising, you're overweight, you haven't been exercising for 15 years, and then you try to go for a run or something, it's going to be really hard. Your body's not used to it, and you have to adapt to it, and you have to get used to it, and you have to lose some weight and stuff like that to make it an easier thing to do. But eventually you can be running 5Ks and it won't be any kind of problem. It'll be easy for you. But there's a journey there.
It's a journey.
You have to go through to get to the point where running a 5K is no big deal, and you can do it in your sleep or whatever.
And just like running that 5K becomes easy, eating healthy becomes easy as well, because you're no longer drawn to those unhealthy foods.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you might never have them. You might choose to have them occasionally, but there's not that same urge to have them.
Exactly. All right, Dawn. So if the listeners would like to find out more about you and get in touch with you, where should they go? I have a website, dawncuckow.com. Could you spell that for us?
So Dawn, DAWN CUCKOW. So dawncuckow.com. Or my Instagrams, there's a lot of information on my Instagram, and that's at Cuckow Dawn. So at CUCKOWDAWN.
Okay. So you can get you on the website or Instagram. All right. Well, hopefully people have learned, the listeners have learned something valuable today. And I definitely recommend the book because, like I said, it has a lot of information that everyone should know. And thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks very much for having me on here, Sean. I've loved talking with you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dawn. It was filled with nuggets of great information, and I hope you were able to take away at least a few actionable items to help make your weight loss easier. Like Dawn said, when you first start out, it can be hard because your body is out of balance. So don't beat yourself up. The longer you work to get your body back in balance, the easier it will become. This is the body effect. And with that said, this is Coach Strick saying thanks for listening. And remember, when calories in, calories out doesn't work, that, my friend, is a calorie conundrum.
This podcast, including Coach Strick and guests, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects for the use of any information contained herein. Coach Strick and/or guests may recommend products or services in which they have a direct or indirect financial interest. To find out more, please visit www.calorieconundrum.com.